Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Eric Wright. I'm the education specialist for the Wisconsin Writers Museum. I'd just like to thank everybody for showing up tonight on this Friday evening and joining us for our virtual movie night discussion. Tonight, we are going to be talking about Pork Chop Hill, the 1959 Gregory Peck film. I had not seen it before. We decided to view it for this event. So we'll talk about that in a second. Pork Chop Hill from 1959, directed by Louis Milestone, who some of our longtime participants will remember from the 1930 film All Quiet on the Western Front, which is one of my top 5 war movies of all time. He did win an Academy Award for that one. Also, cinematography for this film was done by Sam Levitt, who's worked with Gregory Peck before on Cape Fear from 1962. Sam Levitt also did The Defiant Ones from 1958 and The Court Martial of Billy Mitchell from 1955. That is one I'm unfamiliar with. I'm going to have to check that one out. We got a lot of Billy Mitchell stuff at the museum, and so we really like to focus on those unique stories. So I'd like to see that film and see how that one comes out. This film also has a huge star-studded cast, a lot of actors that we've seen before, and a lot of these actors, this is their first major motion picture appearance. Not for Gregory Peck, of course. He was already a big star at this time. As well as Rip Torn and Woody Strode, who we've seen in many of our films. But George Peppard, I believe this is his first film, along with Robert Blake, Gavin McLeod, and Martin Landau, just to name a few. There's a lot of other big names in this film that we would recognize, but those are just a few of the highlights. This was filmed in Westlake Village in San Fernando Valley, California, between May 19th of 1958 and just into July of 1958. It was only supposed to take 40 days to film, but they had to tack on an additional 15 days to get some of the war footage, just the way they wanted it. And I want to talk a little bit about, when I say just the way they wanted it, I'll talk a little bit about that later also. It was distributed by United Artists, and it was released on May 29th of 1959. And it had a budget of just under $2 million, $1,750,000. And the box offices brought in 2.1 million. So it did make money. It wasn't a huge money maker for United Artists, but it did make some money. And it was considered at the time a box office hit. Not a huge success, but a box office hit. Good enough for them to put that feather in their cap. And of course, this is based on the book by retired Brigadier General S.L.A. Marshall. He was part of the American Expeditionary Forces in World War I. And then after he got out of the Army, he went into journalism and focused on specializing in military affairs. And the book that he wrote, Pork Chop Hill, I can't remember. There's like a second title to it, The Exciting Adventures of Men in War, or something like that. It's kind of grandiose, but the main title of the book is Pork Chop Hill. So I hope everybody bought their applesauce tonight, because we got a lot of pork chops to devour. No? I thought it was coming. Before we get started, I just kind of want to go around and see what everybody thought of the film. And Sally, we'll start on the very end with you. Oh, you're muted, Sally, sorry.
Forget. I thought it was okay. Not the top of my list or the worst of my list, but, in the middle. It was fine.
All right. Jose, how about you? How did you like it?
Oh, I watched the movie this morning. I really liked. I can compare with other movies that make an announce of the war, but the ending of this one is a kind of different. But I really liked.
Excellent. Okay, good. Jacqueline, how about you?
Okay, so I'm like in the middle of house renovations, and I saw this movie back when I was like in my teenage years. It was like my all-time favorite, and I can watch it again. You have it, it's online. I mean, I'm so excited.
Yeah, I don't know if I got it sent to everybody, but I did send a YouTube link around. It is on YouTube for free.
Okay, this is like my all-time favorite.
If I didn't get that to you, I definitely will after we're done here tonight. Have everybody. So Chris, we'll go to you next. What did you think of the film?
I'm kind of with Sally. It was okay, but I didn't think it was the best it's sort of in the middle of the ones we've seen over the last couple of years. I had my difficulty. I had a couple of difficulties. One was imagining Gregory Peck as the lieutenant. He just seemed old for being, and we encountered that in one of the other movies. I can't remember which one, where one of the officers seemed to be old for a lieutenant. But in this one, he just seemed really too old to be a lieutenant. I was trying to figure out how he could have been a lieutenant at whatever age he appeared to be. And I couldn't come up with a good explanation. It was just kind of weird. The other thing I had difficulty with was sort of midway through, you have the whole Woody Strode character. And suddenly he just disappears without an explanation until you come up to it near the end. And particularly after Gregory, Lieutenant said that stick with me, and all of a sudden he just kind of disappears. And that was like a disruption in the narrative as far as I was concerned. I was wondering, where did he go? What happened to him? Did he get killed? You know, that kind of thing. So it was a couple of things like that sort of lowered my evaluation of the film.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. And before we get into too much more of that, I want to welcome Mike as well. Mike, thanks for joining us tonight. Can you just give us a quick impression of what you thought of the film? No, you're muted there, Mike. No, still muted.
Having a little trouble with my screen, but I got it now.
That's okay. So the first thing we do is just kind of go around and get a general impression of the film. So, and just if you could just tell us real quick, you know, did you like it? Did you not like it? Kind of what did you think briefly?
Yeah, I liked it. I probably haven't seen it in 40 years, but and I didn't remember most of it. But I thought it was good. The point about the lieutenants being old, he was too old to be a lieutenant. There's only one way I could figure that he could be that old as a lieutenant. Apparently, he and his brother-in-law are both West Point grads because they're both wearing academy rings, right? So the only way you could be a lieutenant and a West Point grad and be that old, he had to be enlisted first and then go to West Point.
Or I was thinking maybe he could have been a higher ranking officer, but had been demoted or busted down at some point. But still, either way, you know, that just kind of forces us to read a little bit too much into the film, which isn't what a film is supposed to do. A film is supposed to really, you know, explain itself.
Gregory Peck is busted.
Yeah,
I've expected.
That's kind of
I have expected Atticus Finch to show up several times.
And what's his Horatio Hornblower as well there. And kind of this kind of leads right into my first question. You know, like I said, films are supposed to be self-explanatory. We're not supposed to really have to think a whole lot into it, and especially films like this. And I thought they did a great job in setting the tone and explaining a lot with that opening montage. It really, I thought, in my opinion, it really brought the viewer up to speed on what was going on. It brought the viewer not only with the where the platoon is at and the war sequences, but also the side story with the negotiations at the peace conference as well. So I was kind of impressed with that montage at the beginning, that opening montage. I'm typically not. I'm typically kind of annoyed with those things. But I thought they really did a good job on this one. And I was just curious what everybody else thought about that. Good, Sal.
Well, I had to watch the movie twice to kind of get that montage. I'm glad you sent me questions because it gave me things to look for in the movie. I had to go back and watch it twice because I kind of missed it the first time. So maybe it wasn't that impressive to me.
Perhaps. Yeah, usually the opening credits, you know, you're just looking at, you know, who's doing what in the film and everything else behind those, you just kind of filler. But I think it was kind of important in this film anyway. So I'm glad you went back and watched it a second time just to kind of get you know, that sense. Mike, you were gonna chime in on that?
I enjoyed the beginning. I was disappointed in the ending,
Mhm.
but I guess
Okay.
that's the point. It's the movie could have been subtitled "The Waste of War."
Right. Yeah. It certainly, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But you know, it's certainly, there was a clear message being sent with this film,
Mhm.
and it was not a good one. And not only at the end of the film was it demonstrated, but it was kind of demonstrated all throughout the film too.
Mhm.
And I do have this question in here about, you know, mistakes being made during the preparation. You know, they said the barbed wire was going to be completely obliterated with their artillery barrages. They had support from L Company. They were going to be afforded heavy weapons and support if they needed it. And none of those things came to pass. And it was just a really a letdown as far as the preparation goes.
Mhm.
And I think I kind of know everybody's answer on this one, but I did ask, you know, did these poor choices by the military planners, did it make this film more gripping for you? Or did it make you a little disheartened to see that, you know, this is the reality of war, and this is sometimes how we plan or not plan for situations and events?
It's very disturbing to me that the military is supposed to have, you know, their ducks in a row, and for this to happen. And I know it happened all the time in wars, but it just disgusts me. It's like these soldiers' lives aren't worth that much.
I kind of wondered whether a lot of these mistakes were miscommunications along the chain of command, because later in the movie, you get this sense that there were conflicting perceptions and conflicting motives at the various levels, from the battalion to the regiment to the division. And so I thought that some of these mistakes, which were pretty crucial,
Mhm.
were a result of these conflicting goals. I mean, it wasn't so much in the preparation, but in the execution, for instance, when the lights come on, you wonder who was, you know, who was deciding this stuff. And and I think the difficulties in the radio communications were sort of a metaphor for miscommunication throughout the movie.
Mhm.
And not
Does
just
anybody know if
go ahead, Mike.
the scene where the spotlights came on, do you know if that was accurate?
I don't know if that is a true event that happened. And I'm, you know, when I saw that, I was kind of wondering, why would you have spotlights in the middle of a war zone?
I thought
Yeah,
it was the
I
enemy.
was
I thought it was the
too.
enemy's lights.
I
thought
did
it was
as
the
well.
enemy's lights.
Yeah.
I did as well. And then, yeah, when Gregory Peck starts saying how that's, you know, somebody on their end, and they need to get on the radio and call them to tell them to shut them off. And I'm just like, it just seems like an odd thing to have in the middle of a war zone and in the middle of this film. It didn't make any sense to me.
Well, I also, there was the misunderstanding about where the artillery fire was coming from, with some of the soldiers believing it was friendly fire and others believing it was from the Chinese. Again, the miscommunication, the lack of understanding of what the actual situation was, kind of struck me.
Yeah.
The other thing, in the question of whether that was true or not, in checking out SLA Marshall, I came across a bunch of stuff in particularly in some reputable publications about his honesty in his writing. So that made me wonder about the accuracy of some of these of this movie, where it said it was based on fact.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple other instances that leave me questioning that as well. Did you have one more thing to add, Mike?
And one thing I was confused about, as they're charging up the hill, and they're getting fired on by the enemy, I'm wondering, where's our artillery?
Yeah, they were seen to fire just fine earlier, and now all of a sudden, when we need the support,
Yeah.
you know, we can't get it. And that was one of the things that is just constant, the constant support that they were promised. It just never materialized for one reason or another. And this brings up the question of why are they trying to retake this hill? You know, you have peace negotiations going on. Of course, the rumor mill is always constant. Scuttlebutt's always going on. But you know, there's this sense that the war is going to be over very soon, or at least a ceasefire of some sort. What's the point?
I thought the admiral's explanation later in the film, when they take that break in the negotiations, I thought he probably captured it. There wasn't any purpose other than the Chinese testing to see how much we'd be willing to sacrifice for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of got the sense of a bargaining chip as well, but maybe a little less than what you were mentioning, Chris. And I'm just curious, where's the sense in these decisions when you're so close to what might seem like an end? I don't get it. And Sally, I could see, I know exactly this is what you're thinking as well. It just doesn't make any sense, and I still can't make any sense out of it. And it still kind of bothers me. And I hope that the true events really don't reflect what we saw in the film. You know, being a former soldier myself, I really like to think that my former employer was a little bit smarter than all that. But you know, you never know sometimes. But what's everybody else's sense on the futileness of all this?
I think everybody who's been in the service knows that the military are the best planners and executors and the worst planners and executors. Right?
Yeah, I would agree with that, Mike.
Depending on the day.
Depending on the day, yeah.
Or as the aphorism kind of goes, that no battle plan survives first contact.
Yeah, pretty much. But you know, surviving first contact and just going to pot before anything even really happens, there's two different stories. And what we see from this film is just a complete failure. And like I said, I hope that the based on fact portion isn't entirely true at all. Let's get back to Lieutenant Clemens a little bit. The way too old Lieutenant Gregory Peck. I love his acting. I thought he portrayed his character really well. But what kind of leader was he in this film? And the second part of my question, I think, is even more important. Were his decisions, were they courageous, or were they simply obedient?
I don't know that they were either. I think they were just necessary. I don't know that I mean, there were a couple of instances where he had to follow orders, basically, which was stay there and hold the position. But for the most part, I think his decisions were based on what he saw at the time and what he thought was necessary.
Part of me thinks he made decisions because he cared about the soldiers, and maybe he wasn't following direct orders or doing what was best in a military situation, but what was best for the lives of the soldiers.
Okay. Kind of along that, sorry, go ahead.
I agree with Sally. I think that you really did get a sense that he was kind of operating independent of whatever was going on around him about you know, the command echelons. He was just stuck there, and we see with all the mistakes that you've highlighted in the notes. If you've got that much sort of disarray going on, you have to act in the best interest of your troops.
Yeah, that's certainly true. You know, when you're out there, you're cut off from communications. You have to make decisions. Some of them are tough. Some of them aren't the right ones, unfortunately. But you still have to make those decisions if you're in that leadership position, for sure. And you try your best, or at least we hope our military leaders in those positions try their best and not just look out for themselves, but look out for the whole, unit. And we do see that, I would say, for the most part. And kind of along those lines, what was his reasoning for retaking this hill? I mean, we had what we saw at the negotiating table. We had what we saw at the divisional level with the colonel and the general talking. But what was Lieutenant Clemens' reason? Does anybody remember?
He's just a guy focused on his mission.
It was, but he also said when he was talking to his brother-in-law that not only taking it the first time, but retaking it the second time, we've lost too many men. Regardless of what this is, a hill, a pond, a trench, it doesn't matter. We've lost too many men to just, we have an obligation now to take it simply because of the blood and guts and sweat and tears we've already put into it. And that's a tough choice. It's the right mentality, but to make that choice and to keep going is a tough one. Because you're still going to lose more men. Sorry, go ahead.
He realized the cost was too high, but he also realized that he didn't know if he understood the bigger picture.
Yeah, and you're right about that's a good point. I don't think he did have a sense of the bigger picture. He knew there was a bigger picture. He just hoped that it was worth it. Right. Yeah. I never felt like he was getting a grasp of that bigger picture, what was going on at the negotiating table, what was what was going to happen in the next few days as far as a ceasefire goes. He just never gave the impression to me that those were things he had knowledge of. And certainly at times during the film, things that he wasn't even thinking of. He was too focused on his mission, which he should be. Yeah.
I want to know if the part where the public information lieutenant comes up and thinks that everything is everything's one. Was that accurate? Because that was the dumbest part.
That was bizarre.
And maybe Chris has a little more detail on this, but I would imagine that's probably an accurate scene. Yeah, unfortunately.
I thought that really kind of encapsulated the whole lack of communication up and down the chain.
Yeah, you got this. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Clemens was like, "I give up" when that lieutenant came in.
There's nothing else I could do. Yeah, you got this fresh-faced kid, probably not even a year out of college, big smile on his face, clean uniform, ready to take some pictures. That cracked me up.
True shave tail.
Shave tail Louis. Speaking of public information officers, though, what about the Chinese propaganda announcements as they're beginning their assault up the hill?
They were good at it.
Yeah, that was, and as a matter of fact, I have in my notes here, that was some serious psyops.
Yeah, they invented it.
I'm not a gun owner, but dang, I wanted to shoot the guy. He was driving me insane. He wouldn't shut up. Like, God dang. But I know that happened. I mean, Tokyo Rose.
Yeah, and
driving me nuts.
I mean, I don't know how the rest of you felt, but like I said, I hadn't seen this movie before. So when I watched it the first time in preparation for this, and when they first came on, that really kind of creeped me out.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in my living room with a nice cold beer on a Saturday morning. I can't imagine how it is to be on that hill and all of a sudden have this voice coming at you, welcoming you to your death, playing taps. I don't know how I would have reacted to that. I don't know how many people would have reacted to that. That would have really seriously messed me up.
And then later playing some very soft, smooth music to remind you of what it was like back home, and
in the grass in the park, and
yeah, it was.
That was.
Although I did get the sense, I mean, later on as he gives him the 45-minute deadline, that to a certain extent a little bit of humanity had crept in, and that he was, had a certain amount of sympathy for them in their position.
Well, and sorry, go
Was
ahead,
that,
Mike.
was that sincere, or was he just a good salesman?
Well, it could have been he's just a good salesman, but in doing it, that's what good salesmen do. They play on your sympathy and empathy.
Yeah, who said once you can fake sincerity, you got it made?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know who said that, but that's a great quote.
Yeah.
And this kind of, segues into another question. There was a point where their propagandists basically, they said, lay down your arms and we'll be happy to lay down ours. And I'm curious, do you think they were sincere about that? Or do you think that was just a ruse?
Ruse.
Bruce.
No way in hell were they sincere about that. There's no way.
I know, tell us how you
They're
really feel, Sally.
Sneaky Pete. They're sneaky Pete's. I don't trust them for a second.
Well, you kind of get that sense from the scenes at the negotiations when they just seemed
Exactly.
utterly indifferent, like
Mhm.
they weren't even tuned into what the American side was saying.
Right.
I watched the movie today as I'm listening to today's news, and I'm thinking nothing's changed.
Exactly what I thought. Oh,
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's always attracted me to history is, the more that changes, the more things stay the same. What's the French term? Plus ça change. I can't
Plus chemin chose.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Yeah, it's strange how just the narrative works out like that, not only in film and literature, but in real life as well. Yeah, I can't say it any different way. The more things change, the more they stay the same. For good or ill, that's often the question. But in this film, it was certainly terrible.
I think everybody in the administration that's dealing with China should be required to watch this movie.
So we talked about that. Let's get into a little bit about the character that Woody Strode played, Private Franklin, or was it Specialist? I can't recall. What was Franklin's problem with being out there? Why was he so disgruntled? No? Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was thinking of it in the context of the fact that Truman had only integrated the armed forces about 3 or 4 years before that. Mm-hmm. And I suspect, given the attitude that he was showing, that a lot of it had to do with suspicion about racism in that unit. I was kind of surprised to see that that there were actually 2 black soldiers in that unit. One of whom was
the other one, and we saw him in the last Korean film that we watched, Men at War. He was the one, the sergeant putting the flowers in his helmet.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I thought that it made me think of what Muhammad Ali said when he was asked why he didn't want to fight in Vietnam, and he said, "No Vietnamese ever called me a nigger."
Yeah, it wasn't their war.
Yeah.
Although, at the same time, we're all supposed to be Americans, and this is supposed to be a unified, action. But you're right, with the desegregation of the military only occurring in 1948, excuse me, which is, like you said, it's just 3 or 4 years before the events of this film. And even some of the research I was doing about the Korean War, there was still segregated units during this time as well. That desegregation process,
most of them still were.
Yeah, the integration process really hadn't come to fruition yet. Just like slavery after the Civil War, slavery was supposed to be ended, but it took a number of years before they were able to work out all the kinks that everybody else was finding. And still instituting this terrible thing. And
that's kind of why I think that the Woody Strode character was kind of not only supposed to represent a real soldier, but also a metaphorical.
Mostly, yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the beginning, Chris, how, you know, they were introduced to this character, were shown his problems, and he's told to stay by the lieutenant, and then all of a sudden, you know, we don't see him for the next half hour, 40 minutes, and then all of a sudden he appears at the end of the film again. And I'm just curious, do you think this was kind of just kind of a you know, lip service, maybe, to show how this integration or desegregation process was supposed to be working, and including the character of Franklin and also James Edwards' character, which didn't get much screen time either. So you have these two black actors in this film that are supposed to be making a difference, but their roles are relatively minor. They're relatively cast aside after they're introduced. And so I'm just curious if anybody else, I saw it like this anyway, if anybody else sees this as just kind of paying lip service to minorities at this time.
Sort of, yeah.
I'm not sure they would have even been in this film if the Army hadn't been participating in it and maybe trying to, shall we say, whitewash the image.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Chris. And it's a shame. This film could have been really, really good. And reading up on it, I think maybe there was conflict between Louis Milestone, the director, and Gregory Peck, who was not only the star but also the producer of the film, and he also directed a few scenes as well. And there was also some issue with Gregory Peck's wife, who saw the first few shots in the editing room and was kind of complaining that her husband didn't have enough of a role in the beginning of the film. Seriously. And so this is where the conflict between Gregory Peck and Louis Milestone came into play. There was some post-production editing done to make Gregory Peck's role bigger in the beginning of the film. And this did cause some consternation between the director and the star. And I lost my train of thought completely. Where was I going with that? Well, regardless,
I kind of wondered whether there might have been something in this movie. This was, as I recall, it was, you said it was released in 1958, 59, something like that. Yeah. I mean, they were, the French were involved when we were getting into, you know, the early stages of Vietnam at that point. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wonder whether there was something with the Army's participation that they were looking at some way of kind of, I don't know exactly how to explain it, but there was some, they knew, they could see what was happening in, they could see what was happening in Indochina, and maybe seeing that this might be some way of propagandizing the value of the U.S. Army.
Well, they certainly did a poor job, didn't they?
Well, it didn't. I think so.
This certainly wasn't Top Gun or anything like that, where you have a huge recruitment process afterwards. People who watch this film are like, no, there's no way.
No way.
Those people are nuts.
Yeah. I mean, I was disappointed with how little Woody Strode got, because I like him as an actor. I mean, yeah. He's been very good over the years, and it was too bad that his character was downplayed so much.
Yeah, I would agree. When they first showed his face, I was like, oh, I was excited. And then, you know, the more the movie went on, I was just like, this is a waste of his talent. And it's not even a very good role. So yeah, I don't know. And back to my train of thought that I lost a minute ago. I was just curious about, you know, the tensions between the director and the star. And I was just wondering how much this led to, for lack of a better term, I guess, shortcuts being taken in the film. You know, editing out maybe somebody's role more than it was meant to, so somebody else's role could be beefed up a little more. You know, who knows what happens in post-production. But it was disappointing to see as far as that goes. I thought Men at War did a better job of looking at the integration process than this one did. But there's also the PTSD factor. And we did see a little bit of that in this film too. And I don't want to compare this constantly to Men at War, but what did everybody think of the PTSD factor in this film? How did they deal with it, and were they successful in highlighting this problem?
At least they drew attention to it. I'm not saying they made a big highlight out of it or resolved it or anything, but at least they brought to light that it was happening, which was a step forward.
Okay. Anybody else have a thought on that?
Well, they definitely showed it, but it didn't even have a name back then.
No, shell shock, cowardice.
Yeah, cowardice.
Yeah. But
Crazy.
I thought, personally, I thought they didn't do a very good job with it either. About as poorly as they did with the integration process.
It was 1959. They didn't understand it.
Yeah, but just from a cinematic viewpoint, they did understand a little bit because they showed it in the character of the runner. And
Yeah,
when we first met him, he was pretty shook up.
Yeah, he was.
But then, you know, he, I guess, halfway through his mission to go from one side of the hill to the other, you know, he finds his courage, I suppose, and goes on to do heroic things that would normally win people medals of honor. But I thought it was kind of cheap the way they introduced it. They kind of took a model that had been used in movies past, and they introduced this character in that manner, and then they turned him, you know, into this heroic person. Which is not to say that doesn't happen. Certainly, people find their courage in dire situations.
Yeah, but he was pretty sick.
Yeah. I just don't like the way they treated it, and I thought it was also just like with the Woody Strode character. I thought it was just kind of like a throwaway piece that was meant to just kind of draw your attention for a little bit, but wasn't something that was going to stand out or be a highlight,
I
unfortunately.
think they were trying to highlight it, but they didn't understand it enough to do it right.
Yeah.
And I thought that with the kid that he turns into a runner, if the kid had been portrayed as really having the PTSD, I don't think he would have given him that kind of an assignment. He would have just told him, stay here, stay down, stay with me, like he did with Woody Strode.
Yeah, perhaps.
That was a risky move.
Yeah.
I could see why he did though, turn him into a runner and send him off.
Didn't have anybody else.
But not just that, but if you can refocus somebody's attention on something else besides this combat, besides these horrible things happening in front of you, let's refocus your attention. I'm going to give you a mission that's not going to involve fighting or anything like that. You're going to take a message from point A to point B and then come back. I can kind of understand that, but still, I didn't like the way that I thought they could have done a better job. I'll leave it with that. And then lastly, before we get into you know, the aspects of filmmaking, what does the sacrifice to take this hill, the whole point of the movie, what do you think this says about the broader context of Cold War mentality?
I thought it was just a big mind game. I don't know. It just seemed like a psychological war more than a combat war to me.
And
even though there was
honestly,
plenty of shooting.
Isn't that kind of what the Cold War was, though?
Yeah, it was just mind games to me. The whole movie was, everybody was playing mind games with each other.
Yeah. Anybody else want to chime in on that last question? No? All right.
I want to digress 1 second.
Sure, go ahead, Sal.
Lieutenant Ohachi, is that how you say it?
I'm not quite.
Thought it was Ohashi.
I was just shocked that they had an Asian actor or Asian soldier in a movie that was a conflict in Asia. I thought it was weird.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Anybody else want to take a stab at that before I give my 2 cents?
I suspected in part it was to like what happened in World War II, where Japanese Americans were went into combat in the Pacific War to show their loyalty.
European theater too. 100th Infantry Regiment. A lot of those soldiers coming from Wisconsin, to include Sergeant Toki, I can't remember, Akira Toki. And that was actually called the Purple Heart Battalion over in Europe, because they put them in the front line so often and that by leaps and bounds, the percentage of men earning Purple Hearts in that battalion was far greater than a lot of other combat units in Europe at the time. And as I did some research on this, that character was actually supposed to be from the Hawaiian Islands, which, oh my goodness, anybody want to check me on this? 1958, Hawaii became a state?
Something like that.
59.
15. Oh, so,
I
okay,
was in
so
grade school.
so it was right there. So I think maybe what they're trying to do with this character is just show, I mean, if they're showing them, if they're going to take a look at one group of minorities, why not kind of start covering the gamut? And I guess if that's the mentality or the mindset that they were going for, where was the Hispanic representation? Because, you know, you got a large Hispanic population in the United States at this time as well. And they were fighting in World War II. Why not have them fighting in Korea? But I suspected it was just trying to show another side of this integration process. To some extent, I don't know how successful it was. I liked the character. He had a great line in there when they were talking about the bayonet charge in the end. And he goes, that's all right. My ancestors are pretty good at this bonsai business.
That was good.
I thought it was a bit tacky, but I also thought it was a good line. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Sally, because I had almost forgotten it. That's a good point. What about the star-studded cast? We've seen many movies where it's just inundated with big names, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. We all seem to be kind of agreed that this isn't really the best movie. We enjoyed it, but it's not the best movie. But did that star-studded cast, do you think that made a difference or not?
They weren't stars. I was amazed when they first ran the credits in the beginning. All the people that became stars that I never realized were in this movie.
Me neither.
No, that's a good point, Mike. And I brought that up right at the beginning. I talked about how this was a first endeavor for a lot of these guys that we recognize as big names now. So maybe I didn't quite have that question nailed right on the head like I should have, because you're right. These guys weren't stars at the time. So yeah, no, that's actually a good point. Maybe I should have thought that question through a little bit better.
I knew what your intent was, though. I didn't even recognize any of them, so they didn't come across as stars to me in this show. And I watched Twilight Zone. I didn't even find him in the movie, and I watched it twice.
The one I
couldn't was in this.
What's that?
Harry Dean Stanton.
Yeah.
He was. Didn't see him.
I think part of the difficulty of watching a movie nearly, what, we're talking 60, 70 years later.
Yeah.
When you're seeing it back through that lens of what we know about what they became.
Right.
That's what's kind of disconcerting, because as they were running the credits at the beginning of who was in it, I was going, really?
Yeah, where was Vic Merrill? I don't know. I missed them all.
And now I feel a little ashamed now, actually, because as a historian, I should know better than to look at past events through the lens of the future. I should know better than that. And I did. I failed completely on that question.
I liked it. I just, sorry, I missed the guys. I'm not watching it a third time.
Oh, come on, Sally. Where's your bravery?
I know. I have none.
Looking at the aspects of the film itself, boy, I want to talk about cinematographer Sam Levitt. What did you guys think of his cinematography in this film? And you could tell by the tone of my voice what I thought.
Well, it felt like I was there.
Yes. Chris, did you have something?
Well, I think the black and white also enhanced it.
Yes. Yes. I agree.
I think if it had been in color, it would not have been as stark. I mean, given that it was already kind of not the greatest war movie, at least the black and white cinematography, I think, brought a certain amount of realism to it.
I think
agree.
for all the people that were in it, it probably was black and white.
Yeah.
Jacqueline, did you have something to add there?
No, I was just saying, I watched this movie several times with my dad, who is military, and sometimes when my uncles would come by, who were military. And the black and white meant something different to us in our household. So to see it as vividly as black and white in the movie was also translated into us sitting down there, sitting watching it, and uncle from paratroopers or dad from Army would say, no, that doesn't happen. No, Jackie, that doesn't happen. And so it had to be, a lot of it had to be explained to me. Like I said, I was in my teens, but every time it would come on, we'd watch it. It was like, come on, it's coming on, Port Chop Hill, come on. And anything with Gregory Peck, I don't care what it is, that's my movie. I'm just saying.
Me too.
He could have been Sad Sack. It was still my movie. Gregory Peck was in it. So, and then to see, we were talking or hitting on earlier that in 1959, when it came on, the climate of the United States, or the climate of the people of the United States, this great big melting pot that's oozing over different cultures, to see those different characters of those different cultures in that movie, even though they had a minute here or a minute there, some of that was exciting for us. And then I'm in a community which is mostly Asian here in California, where I'm at. And so to see that character in the movie, even during that period of time, in this same house that I'm in right now, it was amazing. Just that it was as if it was letting civilians know in black and white, the crispness of it, how things could have been or may have been construed of the military.
All
And
right.
especially with the guy coming on the, don't you want to go home? You could be there, all of that. And I was like, Dad, did they really do that? And he's like, look, I'm not that old, but stuff like that was going on in our household. So like I said, anything Gregory Peck, I'm on it. So even if it's bad.
I'm with you there. I'm a huge Gregory Peck fan. Jacqueline, can I just ask you real quick, are you in Southern California?
I'm in Northern California. Yeah.
I'm originally from Southern California, so I don't know. I always ask that people when I hear they're from California. You in the South?
No, I'm in the North. But here where we're at, even the people that I went to school with, some of their parents were interred over here at the fairgrounds, which is 2 or 3 blocks from me, during the time when they had them caged up. So I grew up with people that lived through that, as we say. So yeah,
Interesting.
it's interesting.
One of the things I wanted to talk about with Sam Levitt, we talked about the black and white aspect, and Sally mentioned about how she felt that she was really there. Great cinematography by him. But one of the things that I really enjoyed, and I've seen some other Sam Levitt films before, maybe not some films that would be readily recognized, like Cape Fear or The Defiant Ones, but his wide shots. He really liked to use that wide lens to give you a sense of depth and just enormity of what, in this case, what a battlefield can actually look like and feel like, and hear, what it sounds like. But I was getting more senses than that. There was a couple times when, certainly I didn't smell anything. How could I? But I thought I did, and it's just his wide shots just really drew me in. And I love the way he did that. And we saw the same thing in a couple other films in the past. And I love talking about those wide shots and how they can be used so well. Same way with the close up to express emotion. And I think with on the reverse, the wide shot can also give you a huge sense of emotion too, because it's just really overpowering your senses at times. And I thought Sam Levitt did a fantastic job as far as that goes with this.
Yeah, some of the scenes where he shot it horizontally across the hillside
Mhm.
as you watch the troops advancing.
Yeah, and those are kind of tough to watch. You know, it's one thing to see it from behind, but when you're talking about that horizontal perspective, you're absolutely right. You do really get a sense of the enormity, and even the desperation of the event itself. I don't know, maybe it's not the same for everybody, but that sort of thing kind of takes a little bit of an emotional toll on me when I see shots like that. And especially when you know that it's not going to end up in a positive way, it just really hits a little hard, I think, which is what they're supposed to do as cinematographers, as directors, as movie makers. They're supposed to be able to evoke those emotions from you like that. So I thought Sam Levitt did a really good job. We are getting a little bit low on time, so I will go to my, well, yeah, we covered that. I'm just making sure we cover all our spots here. I don't want to, we've spent a lot of time. I did talk about Louis Milestone directing this film and the 1930 All Quiet on the Western Front. And I did ask for everybody to be prepared to compare and contrast these two films from a director's perspective. I think we've kind of hit that pretty well throughout the conversation, though. We have gone back and forth, not really with All Quiet on the Western Front, but we have compared and contrasted to Men of War. And so I don't want to belabor that point. So I'll just go to my last and final question, the one I ask every single time. And Sally, we're going to start with you because for some reason you were at the far end, but now you're in the front. So who was your favorite character?
Hey, I moved to the front row. Yay. My favorite character was Lieutenant Ohachi.
Okay.
I thought the screenwriter did an excellent job of making some great one-liners that just made me laugh. And I shouldn't be laughing in a war movie, but they were just great one-liners.
Actually, you should be laughing in a war movie. Sometimes that's all you can do, and sometimes you need to laugh in those situations.
Oh, God.
Don't feel bad for doing it.
And his demeanor, he was so like contrasting to the soldiers. He was more quiet and calm and wasn't, you know, he certainly didn't appear to be upset by the war. He was more controlled, I guess. His emotions were more controlled. I just liked him.
No, and you know, I didn't look at it like that initially, but you're right. He did seem to have more of a sense of calmness about him. Even when things were really going to pot, he still just kind of had his composure.
Yeah.
You know, he directed his men. No, that's a good point. I wish I would have noticed that earlier. I might have brought that up in a larger question during the discussion. Chris, how about you? Who's your favorite character?
Well, once I got past the age issue, I think it was Gregory Peck. I mean, he is the center, kind of the center of this whole movie. I guess his wife was right or something like that. I don't know. He's sort of like the rock around which everything seems to revolve. And I thought he did a fine job of carrying that out. And maybe on Sally's point, maybe the Ohashi, maybe it's just that calmness that comes from living in Hawaii.
I wondered.
I'll go to Jose. Jose said in a chat comment, he said he liked the soldier that was chosen as the runner. You know, he started out kind of with the PTSD, but found his courage. Then he attacked that machine gun nest with the grenades. At first, to his dismay, his displeasure, more or less, because he didn't really get that grenade where he wanted it to go, and he kind of got wounded on that. But in the end, he was able to overtake that machine gun nest. He was able to display his bravery, and just like the Pacific Islander character, he was able to gain his composure and take charge of his emotions and master himself. And so, yeah, I think I was actually wondering as well, Jose, if that was who I thought was my favorite character, and I think you might be right. And I think I might be right there with you. Just the way he was able to, like I said, master himself and regain himself and make up for, you know, his, I don't want to call it, you know, I don't want to be negative about PTSD, but he was just able to overcome that situation altogether. I thought that was kind of neat. So Jose, I'm going to say I'm right there with you. I'm going to choose the runner as well. Mike, who was your favorite character?
I'm going to agree with you. My choice was between him. That was Robert Blake, I believe, right?
You know, I'd have to go back and look. Just like you said, they all look so young when you
Yeah.
watch this. We know them now. We've seen them, you know, over all the years, but I can't recall if that was Robert Blake or not.
I think that was Robert Blake. I liked him and Gregory Peck. The one I couldn't identify was George Papard.
Yeah.
Corporal Fedderson. I didn't recognize him.
Yeah, I like, just like Sally said, I'm not so sure I'm going to go back and watch it again, but I kind of want to, just so I can suss out these characters.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Jacqueline, I think we know what you're going to say, but go ahead anyway. Who's your favorite character and why?
Gregory Peck and Vic Morrow, and I'm gonna watch it again and again and again and again.
Well, don't watch it too much because we got a great film coming up next month. And I actually did make a note about what it is this time too, so I wouldn't forget. I just have to find the note now. Here it is. So next month's movie is going to be, and I'm sorry, I believe it's another black and white movie. Please don't virtually throw things at me. This will be our third black and white movie in the last 4 months, I think, 5 months. But next month's movie is the 1966 film Is Paris Burning? And this, have you seen it, Jacqueline?
Oh, I love it.
Oh, I have not seen it, so I'm looking forward. As a matter of fact, I might even watch it tonight. It is on Pluto. If anybody has Pluto, you can watch it there. I will also go through my other sources and see if I can find free copies of it. As soon as I find those, I'll share them with everybody. But this is about Paris, of course, during World War II, the end of World War II, and the French resistance that is actively working against the Nazis during this time. I have met a few French resistance fighters from World War II, and it is amazing to talk to these people. So I'm really looking forward to watching this film and seeing if any of those exploits are, you know, really truly brought to life on film. I'm hoping it's, I'm going to take Jacqueline's approach. I'm going to look at it as this is going to be a really good film, and I really hope that it is. I'm really looking forward to watching it.
I think we know how Jacqueline will answer the first question next month.
Yes.
Well, like the film? Yeah, I thought it is all right.
Eric, this is my first time here. You're going to send out email invitations to everybody who's here?
I can. Typically, I do announce the movie, and just like you signed up for this one, you can go and sign up for the next one. The registration process is already open, but I will send out discussion questions. I will send out links to the film as I can find them. And if I need to, I'll send out reminders to everybody as well, for sure.
I've never seen it, but now that I've heard about it, I'm looking forward to it. So I had a professor who was in the OSS. He was also an Army intelligence colonel, and he's the reason I became a counterintelligence officer.
Oh, all right. Well, thanks for your service, Mike.
Absolutely.
I think people can sign up. I think it's up to 3 months in advance for the various
Yeah, I think
programs.
we have, I think I have everything up through September up right now for registration. And before the end of next week, I'll have everything up through the end of the year. So look forward to that. So yeah, it's great, Jacqueline and Mike. Thank you for joining us. Jose, thank you for joining us tonight as well. It's great to see new faces.
And
I'm sorry. Oh,
and
Dia as well. She's just on the other side of the cursor, so she wasn't showing up. Or he, sorry, I don't know. But thanks for all the new people joining us tonight. You know, I always like talking to all my regulars, and a lot of them didn't show up tonight, which is odd. No. Lisa especially, but Lisa. It's great to have new people attend, and I hope we can at least pique their interest and bring them back next month. We are going to keep doing this for as long as, I can keep selling this to my bosses. I love doing my movie discussion nights. And I forgot to say at the very beginning, I do want to say a quick thank you to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation for their continued support in all our free virtual programming. And as well, I would like to thank their sponsors, both Generac Power Systems. Without those two organizations, without those two organizations, we wouldn't be able to do all this free virtual programming with trivia nights and the curator conversations and the book talks, and our movie discussions and all the other great virtual programming that we do. So thanks to those two great organizations, and thanks to everybody for showing up tonight.
Yeah.
I hope you have the rest of your weekend. I'm going to go and enjoy mine, and maybe I'm going to watch this Paris Burning tonight. And
if you,
I just found it on your website. I just found it on your website and registered.
Oh, perfect. Awesome.
And if you enjoyed this, take a look at the trivia night.
Yeah, Chris is a proponent of the trivia night now. He's a big supporter. We do love our trivia nights. We have a lot of fun. You don't have to be any military historian genius or anything like that.
Look that up.
A lot of people just show up and they really just enjoy learning all this new information. We put it forward in a really fun and kind of competitive way. And it's just a really good time. It's a great way to spend an hour and get a little bit smarter.
Eric, did you mention book discussions?
Oh yeah, we do book talks all the time as well. We have authors come in on our virtual platform and talk about their newest works. Our next book talk is going to be on August 8th, and that's going to be with a professor from San Diego State University, if I'm not mistaken. His name is John McManus, and you can register for that on our website. It's already up and ready to go. Unfortunately, you will not see my smiling face. I will be on leave that week, but our director, Chris Polakowski, will be hosting that event. So you'll have a chance to meet our director as well briefly. But yeah, we do book talks all the time.
Now, do you read books and then discuss, or you just have the authors?
Yeah, we just have the author on to talk about the work, the research that went into it. A lot of times these authors have family connections that they're writing about. They're talking about that.
All right.
And yeah, we've got some really good authors lined up, and we've had some really great ones in the past too.
Okay, well, thanks.
No problem. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your Friday night and enjoyable weekend. And
You too.
we'll see you at the very latest next movie night.